Hello everyone, and thank you so much once again for joining us for this Wednesday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. Up on the hazardous warning graphic here, we've got wind advisories out for the eastern Alaska Range west of the toe cutoff through the passes. It's been out since yesterday. That's going to remain out until 6 p.m. this evening, Wednesday evening, and that's for the gust to 60 miles an hour. And today, around Fort Greely, seeing gusts 56 miles an hour. Those expected to drop off at least under advisory levels here by 6 p.m. Otherwise, the next storm bringing high wind warnings to the coastal areas, the outer coastline of the Panhandle here, and already seeing those stronger wind gusts occurring. That's out until 10 p.m. this evening on the south coast, until about let's see, 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, 10 or 11 tomorrow morning for the north coast, and that's for gusts above 60 miles an hour, and already seeing that occurring in some areas with Cape Decision seeing gusts 67 miles an hour, while Cape Spencer farther to the north is at 3 p.m. reporting gusts to about 52 miles an hour. Heidelberg down south there, 45 miles an hour, and rain just beginning to increase there, but later tonight and tomorrow will be some periods of heavy rain, and that too will be mostly out along the outer coastline with not so heavy amounts inland. Moving on to satellite imagery, here's that next storm winding up here southwest of the Panhandle storm center, but the front right up, pressing up along the coast and increasing those winds quite a bit, and those be storm force winds out in the marine areas through this evening and overnight tonight, as well as the Gulf of Alaska for tonight. Otherwise, a break here across southern Alaska with some sunshine breaking out in quite a few areas from the eastern Tanana Valley, central eastern areas, Copper River Basin, and across Cook Inlet on out to northeast Bristol Bay. And then it's got some more clouds with pretty light, really just isolated and scattered precipitation here. Gets a little more continuous in the form of snow back toward the western Arctic coast, and then back into the Bering Strait here, or through the Bering Strait to St. Lawrence Island. Seeing rain and snow there, periods of, but about 1/10 of an inch of precipitation fell at both Kotzebue and Nome today, and that fell in the form of snow at Kotzebue. Nome fell in the form of rain, and Savunga and Gamble had a mixture of both. Otherwise, you see kind of a cold core low here out over the Bering Sea, which is dropping south-southeastward here, and break today over the Pribilof. Saw some sunshine break out, St. Paul, St. George, but circulation just to your north, so showers will be dropping in at any time, probably early this evening and throughout as the push of cold air comes southward. Could be mixed with snow at times, but don't look for any accumulations there, at least the way it looks right now. And then we had some rainfall and showers along the Alaska Peninsula and pretty brisk winds here across the central Aleutians, gusting about 45 miles an hour at Adak and Atka today with rainfall out there, generally periods of rain. That became more showery with less wind over toward Unalaska and Nikolsky. You had some scattered showers along the Alaska Peninsula, mostly on the Bering Sea side, with better conditions down south with that northwest wind. Low pressure here over the Seward Peninsula, making for a mixed precipitation pattern there. Rain in the south, mixture to the north, and then up here in the northwest, mostly all snow. Pretty gusty winds today as well, with Point Hope having peak wind gusts about 62 miles an hour. That was earlier today. This afternoon, still up around 55 miles an hour on those gusts. That diminishes back to the west with just flurries and patchy areas of fog for the central eastern Beaufort Sea coastline there. And winds about gusting to around 36 miles an hour over at Gamble today on St. Lawrence Island. Lighter winds here across the eastern Bering Sea, but quite a tight gradient out here. And these winds are expected to increase tonight here for the central Aleutians. As a result, storm warnings are out for the marine areas there, the Adak and Atka area for tonight, as that stronger tighter gradient, and those winds increase. Mostly that trough, the leading edge of the stronger winds, some chillier air, dropping the freezing levels, but the precipitation will remain in the form of rain there, showery conditions. Otherwise, along the southeast coast, rain just starting to show up here at mid-afternoon along the panhandle there, and still offshore as rainfall diminished here over the North Gulf Coast and Prince William Sound in response to the approach of this system. And amounts generally, portage in the last 12 hours is still 1.14 inches, and Seward had about a half an inch, but all that rainfall diminishing and tapering off during the afternoon today, again with some pretty good clearing occurring in some areas from the eastern interior Copper River Basin, as I mentioned, right down across southern Alaska. For tonight, you see that low center pulls back to the northwest here, and that's going to make it tough for this front to really push through the area. So again, high wind warnings out on the south coast tonight. That may make frontal passage expected to diminish after midnight there, and then increase late tonight. Actually, the wind warning on the north coast there starts at 4 a.m. and lasts until noon or so tomorrow, with rain pulling back to the west, almost to the east side of Kodiak Island there. Look for increasing chances of rain with breezy north to northeast winds. Winds definitely stronger here off to the east, but storm warnings out for the Gulf of Alaska as well. Dry over the interior here, and gusty winds continue from Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, right down across St. Lawrence Island. Periods of snow there, cold air coming southward. Mixture of rain. Actually, you can see mixed rain and snow for the Pribilofs as well. But storm warnings at gradient tightens up there, high pressure back to the west, and this trough putting enough of a squeeze on the atmosphere to produce northerlies at 50 knots there. Possible gusts 60 miles an hour or so. Scattered showers up along the Alaska Peninsula. And for tomorrow, not much change out here. Still that north to south wind flow, kind of a boundary of moisture here separating the colder, drier, chillier air back to the west and outright Arctic air over the Russian Far East from the milder conditions here over interior Alaska. So the pattern here really isn't going to change much, maybe lessening wind there for the northwest Capes, but still pretty gusty through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island. And these winds diminishing now. Storm warnings will end here for the Aleutians, and but periods of rain, fog, showers will continue from the eastern Aleutians right up to the Pribilofs. Look for possible clearing Togiak, maybe even Dillingham. Isolated showers from the remainder of Bristol Bay. Low center pulls back to the west here, and that's holding the front, or at least the main frontal boundary will be near or off the coast again. Could be some thunderstorms here along the south coast of the Panhandle tomorrow afternoon. Otherwise, moderate to heavy rainfall. Heaviest rain, I'll say from Elfin Cove over to Cape Yakataga. Heavy at times, moderate into the Kenai Peninsula, western Prince William Sound. Isolated rain or snow showers, not too bad up over the Alaska Range, mostly dry in the interior all the way up to the eastern Arctic coast. Isolated showers for the Aleutian Range. And the outlook for Friday, that low comes back around right on the east side of Kodiak Island, so showers come back or periods of light rain, fog. Lower flying conditions definitely there, especially on the east side of Kodiak. Front really weakens. This is all that's left, quite an area of light rain or snow here from the showers from the Alaska Range. Periods of all the way up the southern slopes of the Brooks Range. And this pattern holding pretty much steady. Northerly winds, snow from the Chukchi Sea to the St. Lawrence Island. Probably enough cold air now for snow down to sea level there over the northern Bering Sea. A mixture of down to the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. High pressure, light winds, partly cloudy skies, Adak and Atka. Next storm just coming onto the edge of the map. Lows for tonight, teens, Brooks Range are 15 to 20 from there up to the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. 20s back to the west. Mid to upper 30s for the Bering Sea to St. Lawrence Island, and upper 20s, lower 30s, southwest interior. 35 to 40, south central Alaska. In the 40s for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow. 20s for the Arctic coast, lower to mid 20s for the north slope into the Brooks Range. 35 to 40, Tanana Valley, all the way back to the southwest coast there, and then mostly in the lower to mid 40s for the Bering Sea, mid 40s for the Aleutians, and 45 to 50 for south central Alaska, and upper 40s to lower 50s for the Panhandle. Lows for Friday morning, mid-teens there. That's around Anatuvik into the eastern north slope. 15 to 20 along the eastern Arctic coast with lows in the 20s. Central interior, lows 35 to 40. Still kind of mild here for southern Alaska. Definitely mild for the Panhandle, upper 30s to lower to mid 40s, and near 40 out over the Aleutians, mid 30s for the Pribilofs. Highs Teens to mid-20s. Brooks Range on up to the north, mid to upper 40s, south central Alaska. And the Panhandle, same pattern, highs 45 to 52. And out west for the Aleutians, highs in the lower to mid-40s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic, Thursday morning, IFR St. Lawrence Island to right down to about the Pribilofs, marginal VFR on down the eastern Aleutians, AKwx, IFR, areas of the Alaska Peninsula, some IFR2, as well as about Chiniak Marmot Bay up to possibly as far north as the Barren Islands. VFR interior, IFR, Arctic coast, western North Slope, and some IFR off the coast of Prince of Wales Island, otherwise marginal. And then for the afternoon, some IFR, narrow band there, Cape St. Elias, Yakataga, over to, not quite to Yakutat, otherwise marginal VFR North Gulf Coast, all of the Panhandle, and out west, not too bad, western Bering, central western Bering, including ADAC and almost Atka VFR. IFR here, about the same area from the Pribilofs up to St. Lawrence Island, western Arctic coast, North Slope, eastward to about Aliktok or so. Pretty good VFR throughout the interior, except for the central Alaska range eastward across 40-mile country. And that diminishes by Friday morning, just areas of marginal VFR, eastern Alaska range. Narrow band of marginal now from with that moisture actually coming from the Arctic, where it's IFR there in the western Arctic coast. Extends all the way down eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. VFR out to the west, VFR to the east, and chance of thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon along the south or the southern coast of the Panhandle. Otherwise, areas of marginal VFR, mostly north and along the coast, IFR North Gulf Coast into western Prince William Sound. That holds through Friday afternoon in that area, and marginal VFR here with, again, the chance of thunderstorms tomorrow or on Friday afternoon there for the Panhandle along the coast. And also up here, some marginal VFR, not much, really pretty good VFR through the interior, so kind of improving here. Marginal VFR lingering mainly along the southern portion of the western Alaska range on the eastern slopes. VFR southwest coast all the way out across the Aleutians and the Bering Sea. And for Anaktuvik, VFR, same forecast for Adding, good VFR tomorrow. And Lake Clark and Merrill starting out marginal, trending toward, or starting out VFR, trending toward marginal, kind of oscillating there at that threshold throughout the entire day, but trending toward a little deterioration in conditions into the afternoon. And that same forecast for Rainy as well, kind of right on the edge of it being marginal to VFR and trending downward a little bit. Windy, marginal VFR, VFR, northern entrance. And Isabel, occasionally marginal again, and Mentesta, Kutztown IFR, gradually improving though to marginal VFR throughout the day, and Tanita, occasionally marginal. And Portage, look for conditions to drop throughout the day as moisture comes in from the southeast. So Kutztown VFR may only be marginal, but improving to IFR. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR. Freezing levels here, 2,000 feet over the Bering Sea and into the central interior actually, except for Bristol Bay. And 2,000 to 4,000 feet over the eastern interior, kind of a cold pocket here over the Yukon, 6,000 feet eastern Gulf of Alaska. Icing, moisture coming up, areas of considerable moderate here, northern Panhandle, eastern North Gulf Coast, maybe Montague Island, east side of the Kenai Peninsula, this off the coast of Kodiak. And with that, stretch of moisture here from the Chukchi Sea southward, could be some areas of isolated moderate, mostly light, if that, here down to the Pribilofs and the central Aleutians, eastern Aleutians as well. Up jet stream, strong jet well to the south, big trough here, cold air is pushed southward to 30 north today. That's going to continue tomorrow, that northerly jet, but 60 to 90 knots, this trough swinging up, that's the next storm coming up with the next system there. And at 9,000 feet, northerlies 30 to 35 here in a band, right down to the eastern Aleutians, up to 40, say for Atka. Diminishing under the ridge out west, and 35-knot winds, or 55 knots coming into the Gulf of Alaska, coming up to the North Gulf Coast, diminishing to 35, and then a band of east-northeasterlies here just north of the Alaska Range across the White Mountains, 30-35 into the Panhandle, except 50 knots there northeast of Yakutat. And at 3,000 feet, looking like this, southerlies 35 knots into the Panhandle, 50 knotters, 50 to 60 coming across the Gulf of Alaska. And east-northeast 20 to 25, maybe size 30 there for the northern Kuskokwim Valley. Northerlies 45 knots through the Bering Strait and diminishing here, but still about 40 knots cutting across Nikolsky, 30 to 40 Central Aleutians, much lighter towards Shemya. Turbulence, occasional moderate chop, Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, and from Nikolsky out to Amchitka, North Gulf Coast across the Panhandle. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, based up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the program.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
And once again, you brought some wonderful satellite pictures to show us and do a little show and tell about. It's just amazing. I can get lost in satellite pictures all day. What did you bring today?
Right. Well, weather satellites, what are they good for? Yeah. Of course, there's the pretty pictures that they bring us. You know, we've got a picture here from April of 2012. Okay. The Suomi NPP satellite, it's what they call a polar orbiter, which means it covers Alaska because we're near the pole. Beautiful image. You can see a storm off of southeast Alaska, the sea ice along the Bering Sea up into the Arctic. A really nice picture, and this is important because it allows a forecaster to see where the storms are, where the ice is, where the clear areas are. You need to know where the weather is now if you're going to forecast it into the future. Exactly. So satellites give us these good pictures. This is called surveillance of the weather. And you know, that same satellite also has another picture from a little more recently, August of 2014, Tropical Storm Iselle bearing down on the Hawaiian Islands. Hawaii doesn't get hit by a whole lot of tropical storms or hurricanes. Sometimes it does. And here's a picture from the same satellite, the Suomi NPP Polar Orbiter. It shows Tropical Storm Iselle approaching the Hawaiian Islands from the southeast. You can see the storm swirling away there, and then there's the Hawaiian Islands. This is a tropical storm, not quite as strong as a hurricane because we don't see the eye wall in there. This is still a serious weather system. And all of this information comes just from that satellite picture. It's so much information, and it's wonderful to look at. You see the beauty and the awe of nature right there depicted in that weather satellite. We call it a polar orbiter because the satellite flies high over the globe. Maybe we could look here at we happen to bring the planet Earth with us. This is our satellite. A polar orbit flies really close to the Earth, maybe 800 kilometers over the Earth, and goes up over the pole and then back down, and then the Earth spins under the satellite as it goes by. That's in contrast to the geostationary birds, which are much further out. And they don't view Alaska quite as well. So we love those polar orbiter satellites here in Alaska.
So when we're a lot closer, we get much better details and imagery and an idea of a better maybe position of what's going on when it's passing right over Alaska or right over Hawaii.
Yes, exactly right. The polar orbiter gives such a good view of places like Alaska. And because it's close to the planet, there's another aspect of satellites in the polar orbit that is helpful for weather forecasting. It's an aspect that's maybe not as immediately obvious as the pretty pictures that we see. And that is the capacity for the satellite to produce what's called a sounding. That is finding the vertical profile of temperature and moisture in the atmosphere. We've all heard of weather balloons. Weather balloons are launched here in Alaska twice a day at a number of airports, everywhere from Barrow to St. Paul Island to Kodiak, Anchorage and Fairbanks, Yakutat, a number of places. Launch these balloons, and we've got a picture of a balloon being launched at an airport, and the balloon goes up. It's pulling a little package, an instrument package with it that reports temperature, pressure, humidity data back, and we use that information to help feed what are called numerical weather prediction models.
The models.
The models, right. It's a mouthful, so we just call it the models. And these computer simulations, these models are computer programs that simulate the motion of the atmosphere. Well, how does a model know what the future will be like? You have to tell the model what things are like now. And you give it all kinds of information, including information from these satellite sounders. Very important. Just how important are they? We have a recent, comparatively recent study that really brings home, and this is Superstorm Sandy. We have a track image here of the track of Hurricane Sandy. Was down in the Caribbean around Cuba, and then it moved north over the ocean, offshore of the eastern seaboard, and then at the last minute, Sandy made what's called the left hook. It turned hard to the left and slammed into New Jersey. Was a major problem for the mid-Atlantic states, a calamity. It fused with another weather system and became known, this is not an official title, but Superstorm Sandy. It was quite the weather event. Well, the modelers, after the event, there's a group of modelers in Europe. They have a very good model, a frustratingly good model if you're the Americans trying to pursue their excellence. They reran their model afterwards in what's called a data denial study, where they kept everything the same. So this is 6 months after Sandy, but they went back, they reran the same model, they fed the model the same initial conditions, that is telling the model, okay, here's where we think Sandy is, down near Cuba in the Caribbean. Everything was the same as it was in the real forecast, except they didn't let the model know.
No satellite data.
No satellite data. So we're going to put that over here, no satellite data for you. The resulting forecast 5 days out, back when the real Sandy was happening and the model had the satellite data, the forecast was pretty good. We've got a graphic here on the left side. We show the forecast of where Sandy would be, and that's the red bullseye on the left. It's just south of where it actually wound up hitting. Not a bad forecast from this computer simulation, 120 hours out. On the right, you see the same model, but it didn't have the satellite data to help it understand things. And the storm is way offshore. It misses. The forecast is more accurate when the model has the satellite data. So that's the idea today we want to convey, is weather satellites. They're important because they show us the pictures of where storms are. We see good examples of this. Yeah, the surveillance right now, it's great to look at those pictures. And in addition, behind the scenes, maybe not immediately obvious, but the models have to have that satellite data for them to be good forecasts. And then a meteorologist uses that information to help everyone with the forecast of where the storms will be in the future.
That is fascinating information that we can look at, see where things have been, because you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. That's that old adage there. But seeing that satellites are actually helping us move forward in the weather information system is pretty amazing stuff.
You bet.
And if you want to check out Eric's satellite images that he's been talking about, whether that's something from today or last week or even much further back in Alaska history, you can easily do that yourself. Go to www.gina.alaska.edu and you can find those images there. Eric, thanks so much for joining us once again. And again, we will join you hopefully again soon for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, where you'll tell us more really cool information about the satellites over our heads in Alaska. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis still showing things closing in here, getting thicker along the eastern coastline here. Still a gap north of the central coast, but the northerly winds continue to push the ice edge southward here, and over the next 4 or 5 days expected to come south out in this area here, about 40 nautical miles. Moving on, coastal water forecasts for the southeast coast. Tomorrow, winds coming down 35 knots on the south coast, but storm warnings 50 knots. Central coast, extreme north coast, south 55 knots, seas up to 27 feet. And storm force gusts from the south or Lynn Canal, southeast 40. Good gales there for Stevens Passage, south 30 for Clarence Strait. Friday's outlook, winds come down considerably here. 15 knots for Lynn Canal, southeast 20 Stevens Passage, 15 for Clarence Strait. Southwest winds out along the coast, much lighter than what you see tomorrow. 15 to 20 knots on the south coast, 20 knots southwest, and then east 20 knots for the north side there at seas around 15 feet. Prince William Sound, tomorrow, east winds 40 knots, 10-foot seas. Storm warnings here for the eastern North Gulf Coast, southeast 50, northeast 40 for the western zones, and north 35 with 20-foot seas for the Barren Islands. Kamishak Bay, northwest 25 knots, north to northeast 15 to 20 for Cook Inlet. Friday's outlook, small craft advisories north of the Forelands here on Friday. Gales south all the way into Kamishak Bay and the Barrens, north 35 knots, seas 11 to 16 feet. East winds 40 knots, western North Gulf Coast, and off to the east there, Middleton Island zone southeast 40 knots, seas near 20 feet, and another day of gales, minimum gales, but still 35 knots out of the east, and those seas up to 9 feet. Kodiak Island, northwest winds increasing to 35 knots tomorrow afternoon with 19-foot seas, north 25 Shelikof Strait, and northwest 25 to 30 for the Alaska Peninsula, and 30-knot winds all the way up to Sitkinak, 25 for Bristol Bay. Outlook for the Friday period, northwest 30 knots for the waters around Kodiak Island, 8 to 11-foot seas, northwest 25, Sitkinak to Castle Cape, and then we've got gales for the Alaska Peninsula, north 35 to 40 knots, seas 11 to as high as 18 feet, highest on the Bering Sea side, Northerlies at 30 for Bristol Bay with 7-foot seas. Out in the Aleutians, out west, well, that's where the lightest winds will be, 25 knots from the northwest, and kick it up to 45 knots on Chitka Island across the central Aleutians. All northwest 45, seas 18 to 24 feet, and north 40 knots here into Unmak Island. Unalaska Island, small craft advisories northwest 30 knots, seas as high as 16 feet. Outlook for Friday. Good gales here for the eastern Aleutians, north 35 to 45 knots, northwest south of Unalaska Island. Seas still over 20 feet on the Bering Sea side, and north 25 to 30 coming down here for the central Aleutians, and east 25 turns southeast 35 due to that storm off to the southwest late in the day for that western zone. Southwest coast northerlies 25 knots south of Nunivak Island, full gales on the north side, 45 knots northern Bering Sea, 35 knot winds for the Pribilofs, and St. Lawrence Island only 10 for Norton Sound. And for Friday, north 30 knots, Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island. Gales here along the southwest coast. Out of the north, the seas up to 14 feet. Gales for the Pribilofs, seas 16 feet. North 30 for St. Matthew Island. Eastern Boulevard Sea coast, southwest 5 to 10, pretty light in those winds. Ice covered there now. And north 15 knots with 5-foot seas for the central coast. Those winds increase on down the coastline to 20 knots, and then Cape Beaufort all the way down to Wales, 30 knots out of the north, up to 13-foot seas. And that wind pattern holds through Friday, 10 to 11-foot seas there. Brisk wind, or small craft advisories on the western coast, and 20 knots in the central coast, and light northwest breezes on the eastern stretch of the coastline. And for tonight, stays windy, snow here through the Bering Strait, mixture of, and right on down, storm warnings tonight for the central Aleutians. And storm warnings here with this storm along the coast, with high wind warnings on the outer coastline, gusts over 60 miles an hour, and rain increasing along the North Gulf Coast to heavy at times, and diminishing winds for the Panhandle tomorrow afternoon. Dry over the interior, no change out here in the west. And taking a look at Friday, that whole pattern shifts eastward a little bit. Still pretty gusty winds, but not as strong as they have been. But still rain and snow showers, falling freezing levels down to the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, and snow for St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait. And that trough weakens, or the front weakens. This is the leftover moisture in the interior in the form of rain or snow. A break over the eastern interior, and then more rain with a weak trough along the North Gulf Coast. Drier over the Panhandle.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.